The first shot fired along the China-India border in decades on Monday. That is the latest development as the tensions escalate along the Himalayan border. However, the event was surprising considering that the Chinese and Indian defense ministers just met in Moscow over the weekend and agreed to peacefully resolve the long-standing border issues. Meantime, the latest data show that India has surpassed Brazil in having the world's second largest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases and third largest death rate. So even though cases continued to rise in May when India came out of a strict nationwide lockdown, reopening has gone ahead in the world's second most populous country. So how will India juggle a border conflict flare-up, a raging pandemic at the same time? Joining me to talk more about this are Mr. Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, and in New Delhi joining us on the phone is Professor Madhav Nalapat at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations at Manipal University. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before the discussion, let's take a look at what has happened between China and India over the past few months. Take a look.
The first shot in 45 years was fired on Monday at the border.
It
was the Indian side that first opened fires at and threatened the Chinese border troops. The calm at the border was for the first time broken by the gunshots since 1975.
Monday's incident was the latest border flare-up between the two countries. Tensions spiked 3 months ago when casualties were reported after a standoff at the line of actual control on June 15th. China said the Indian troops crossed the line and attacked Chinese personnel, which triggered a brawl. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi later said Chinese troops didn't enter Indian territory. Military officials from both sides have since held several rounds of talks trying to cool the situation.
For now, the overall situation along the border with India is stable and controllable.
But tensions re-emerged at the end of August. India accused China of provoking military tensions to change the status quo along the line of actual control. China denied the allegation, saying it's the Indian side that crossed the line of actual control and demanded an immediate withdrawal. Days later, senior officials from both sides met on the sidelines of a ministerial meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Moscow. They agreed to defuse tensions as soon as possible. But that agreement was soon challenged by reports of the shots fired Monday.
So both sides claim that the other side opened the first fire. Mr. Yang, let me start with you. What do you think exactly happened there? Does it mean that the recent bilateral high-level meetups didn't work out, especially after the most recent meeting between the Chinese and Indian defense minister in Moscow over the weekend?
Well, I do believe both sides at a high level have the shared concerns and the shared views that the tension should be calmed down. So that is the shared view, because escalation of the tension will damage both sides' interests, especially from the high level, from the both capitals. The senior leaders from both sides recognize that situation and the consequences clearly. Unfortunately, at the frontier, at the junior level, especially from the Indian troops, I don't think they understand the sense of the consequences their senior level have. So basically, I think there's some gap between the capital and the front line. But I do believe, not because I'm a Chinese, I do believe every soldier of PLA will certainly abide by exactly what the order came from Beijing. So basically, I have no intention to dispute who have shot the first. But I do believe the disciplines of PLA soldiers in the front line.
Mr. Nalapat, give us your side of the story, the Indian perspectives. Also, there are claims that the India Prime Minister Narendra Modi is losing control of the Indian army. Is that the case?
Not at all. That's absolutely not the case. The point is that after what happened in the Galwan Valley, in which 20 of our soldiers were lost, the protocols have changed. Till that time, Chinese troops used to come across the line of actual control, according to us, and our troops used to go across the line of actual control according to the Chinese side. And well, after some time they would be given some tea or whatever, and then they would be sent back. But after Galwan, the protocols have changed, and the troops on both sides obviously are basically on a very high degree of alert. So therefore, this kind of incident happens. On the Indian side, India is very clear that Indian troops have always remained on the Indian side of the line of actual control. The problem is this particular side is not recognized by China in many places.
Professor Yang, so you mentioned there are actually consensus at the top level between China and India, but unfortunately that wasn't carried out at the front line. Should we worry about this? I mean, is this going to happen again?
I do worry about the situation at the front line, especially at the current points, because you know, soldiers from both sides now must have been in very high sentiments against each other. So the problem, the challenge is how to implement the consensus made by the high level through the junior level, the low level. I mean the junior level. So I think it's really difficult for soldiers from both sides. You know, young men, armed soldiers are in high sentiments against each other. Meanwhile, they have to implement or abide by the orders from the senior level. So it's a really challenging job. I really hope soldiers from both sides should follow exactly the order from the both capitals, no matter how sharp differences there have been between our two sides. As long as we can, we calm down the situation, then we can have a room or open a possibility to solve these very complicated and sensitive issues. Without the stability, there's no way to the solution, only towards the escalation of the conflict.
Yeah, exercising restraint is the prerequisite for more dialogue to happen, right? Now, other than the border situation, India is also struggling with the pandemic. Mr. Nalapat, let me get your take on the latest situation there in the country. India has now registered as the second highest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases at 4.37 million. The number of infections doubled in just 1 month. And some fear that the worst is yet to come. Why have confirmed cases reached where they are now?
Well, for one thing, our population is pretty substantial, and two, they live very close to each other. So frankly, we had the world's biggest lockdown, complete and total lockdown for several months. And that had a tremendous effect on the economy and on livelihoods. But then, you know, during that period and afterwards, the virus continued to be there. Now, the fact is that I think we in India are gaining some confidence from the fact that the death rate is actually quite low and very stable at the low percent. Now, if you check the number of total deaths in India, there's no spike. So some foreign media outlets saying, oh, Indians are not really accounting for COVID deaths. That's not correct, because the total number of deaths is in fact about the same as they were in pre-COVID period. So the death rate is low, although the spread of the disease is substantial, and there are some individuals who believe that this is going to spread across the population in the next few months, and more, India will be closer to herd immunity.
Now, the pandemic has obviously taken its toll on the country's economy, with hundreds of migrant workers rendered unemployment almost overnight. Mr. Nalapat, was the reopening simply a knee-jerk reaction to economic downturn, or has reopening led to any economic recovery so far?
Well, I'd like to say that you can't keep an economy shut, and you have to have life with the pandemic. The reality is there have been, pandemics all across Asia and across the world, and that has not resulted in a complete shutdown of economic activity. Now, please don't forget, India is a very young country. About 70% of the population is about 35 or below, and these people want jobs, they want work. So the reality is that a shutdown, a complete shutdown for a long period of time is not possible. So that is why opening out is absolutely necessary. At the same time, more and more efforts are being made to go in for social distancing and to go in for testing. India is now doing a huge number of tests per day. I mean, more than a million. A million tests were done weeks ago, and now it's much more than a million in a day. So that is why more cases are coming up. But again, this is not a panic situation at all.
Now, Mr. Yang, before we go, I want to get your take also on how are you looking at the situation there in India, given how you look at China deal with the pandemic situation. Do you think they're doing the right job there?
Well, I think China indeed has done a great job with the very serious pandemic situation, especially with a really huge population, and we controlled the pandemic in a relatively short time, and meanwhile got the economy return on the right track. But in the situation in India, first I would say I feel very sad when I heard the our great neighbor India suffer from the pandemic. And my point of view is there's a contradictions between the two goals, economy and pandemic. And if you want to control the pandemic, you have to close down. But close down will damage the economy. So I hope and I think the Indian government and the people can find a balanced way to deal with both of the goals.
That's a dilemma every country has to face now in a time of this, right? Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, running out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Yang Xiyu joining us, and Mr. Alpat joining us on the phone. And that does it for this edition of The Point. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.